All right, there we go. Okay, so let me introduce who we have the honor of sharing with us tonight. We have Mark Hess, who is the president-elect of the Colorado Association for Gifted Students, a board member and the editor of the Sang Library, and is the gifted program specialist in a large urban school district in Colorado Springs. He soon will have published 9 books for gifted specialists, including 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade gifted social emotional curriculums, and the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade hands-on literacy series. So you may want to ask him some questions about all these books he's publishing and resources he has after his presentation tonight. He also has shared over 25,000 free resources, and you can visit his website at giftedlearners.org. We are so excited to have Mark with us tonight. He's our very own, and his presentation tonight is called I Used to Be Gifted, which I think a lot of us can relate to in our own lives. What does this kind of label and definition mean for us in our life? So if you all can help me welcome Mark here tonight with us. And I am going to make Mark the host of our Facebook Live tonight so he can control all the things, but it's good to be back with you guys.
All right, yeah, it's great to be back. What an honor to kick it off. You know, this was an idea that Miranda Harper and Nanette Jones had a couple of years ago during the pandemic to start this. And it's been a survivor. Now we're on season 3. Our library online is wonderful. There's so many of those that I need to get back to and watch, and I've just been saving them because, okay, I need to look at this topic. But what an honor to kick off season 3. It's a lot of fun, and it's a lot of fun to be on this side of the host screen, though now I'm hosting as well. So I hope things don't go wonky while I'm talking. But I Used to Be Gifted is the title of a book that I've got coming out this fall with Gifted Unlimited. It's that book that I wanted to write. I mostly write curriculum, and that's not all that fun. But I had a lot of fun writing I Used to Be Gifted, and it's for parents, it's for teachers, it's for gifted adults, it's for all of us who are gifted kids or work with gifted kids. And I tell a lot of stories from my career. I'm going to go starting year number 34 this year. I tell a lot of stories in that book from my career and just try to put some understandings together about giftedness. And tonight, I hope that while we talk about gifted kids, what happens so many times when I'm talking to adults and parents is that the conversation becomes about us and our giftedness and who we are. And I hope that happens tonight. Now, when I'm talking to parents and friends, and sometimes it becomes obvious that I'm talking to a gifted adult. And sometimes I like to point that out. It's like, hey, you're a gifted kid, Like, she's the CEO of a corporation. She's successfully broken the glass ceiling, navigated her way through challenges of the business world for 25 years. And she's going to say, oh, no, maybe my daughter might be gifted, but I'm not gifted. He's an artist. He radiates this energy. He says things that are uncommon. His child scored 99, 99, 99 on the 3 batteries of CAGT. And when he's standing next to his child, they're twins, 30 years apart. And he's going to say, oh, no, I'm not really gifted. 34 years of teaching gifted kids, 56 years of being a gifted kid. And I still feel like that gifted kid. I think I know. I think I've got you nailed. And you could say, no, but I know. There's something about that word gifted. We have better impulses. We've learned it's not socially acceptable to claim any sort of excellence. That word gifted. And giftedness does not equal excellence, though. We're not claiming any excellence for ourselves if we admit that we're gifted, but it just doesn't sound right. Giftedness, you might as well just tattoo a word struggle on your forehead in some form. You should tattoo the word struggle onto your forehead. And maybe that you should say, hey, I struggle. That's a nice way to say giftedness. It's not a judgment, though. Being a gifted learner it's not a pat on the back, and it's not an accusation. And saying you're a gifted learner biologically and physiologically speaking it's really no different from saying, hey, I learn best with visual presentations. I'm a visual learner, or I'm an auditory learner. It's really no different from that in a lot of ways. It's just that word, right? It doesn't sound humble. So many times over the years when I've talked to parents those first times when their child has been identified for the gifted program, and hundreds and thousands of kids, and so many times a parent will say, oh, I used to be gifted. That's where the title of the book comes from. And I know they're not really saying that they're not gifted anymore, but they kind of are at the same time. And I know what they're really saying is, I went to some classes and I had some pull-out groups, and I used to be in this program, and I used to do some pretty cool things when I was in school, but that's not me anymore, maybe. I think it's more about that. I don't know that it's a denial. I don't know that it's saying, I'm not, or it might just be saying, I don't think about that anymore. And it might just be saying that no one really told me what that was all about. And I still don't really know. And I stopped thinking about it, or maybe I think about it a lot now. And this book and these presentations are for people who put some thought into it, or if you haven't, maybe you will. But what if we treated intellectual giftedness the way we treat athletic giftedness, right? Hey, did you hear about my daughter? First team All-State analysis of poetry. She's only a freshman. Really though, you know what? I think her strength is historical fiction. I'm going to try to get her in a summer camp, the Oxford summer camp on historical fiction. That's coming up. Space is limited, but I think, I'm going to save up some money here. I think we can swing that. She's going to be on the starting team. Stanford called. Got to wonder, maybe we should keep her in state. Hey, go Buffs. She could be part of the resurgence of the University of Colorado English department. Wouldn't that be something right here in Colorado? First team All-State. Wonder if she's got a chance to go pro. But the thing is that so many people have said it in so many different ways. From the biology of it, the neurology of it. The brain of a gifted individual is biologically different. Gifted learners are, by definition, neurologically diverse. The neuroscience that tells us there's a larger brain volume, that there's greater connectivity across brain regions, increased brain activation, greater sensory sensitivity, and increased areas associated with emotional processing. And this neurologically diverse individual will face many challenges. It's not a pat on your own back to say you're gifted. This neurologically diverse individual will likely encounter misunderstandings from friends and teachers and colleagues, and from the people who love you best throughout your lifetime. Being gifted is not elitist. And on the contrary, the biology of it may very well provide potential for real struggle in this world, as well as an amazing, creative, and productive capacity. We do talk about what giftedness is. In the first time that I work with second graders at the end of the school year who've been identified gifted, I'm not actively teaching kids right now. I'm in central admin with gifted education right now. But and Jen Delisle and Judy Galbraith have the 8 Great Gripes of Gifted Kids in one of their books about gifted and talented. And the number one gripe is that no one explains what it's all about. And so the number one thing that I want to talk about with gifted identified students is what it's about. And one of the very first things a kid will say, they'll raise their hand and they'll say, well, everybody is a little bit gifted. And so we have the conversation. And no, not everybody is a little bit gifted. It's like saying, everybody's a 14-year-old Canadian girl, at least a little bit, right? And I'm pretty sure that's not true. And so I want to unpack this feeling and this sentiment. We teach our kids well. We teach them not to be boastful. We teach them not to walk around acting like they're the greatest gift to the world. There's that word gift, right? That they're the gift to the world. And We teach them to be humble. And I think part of it is saying you're in the gifted program now, and everybody's a little bit gifted. I think it's natural for a parent to say something like this, but no, not everybody is gifted. All children are unique. All children's lives are precious. All children deserve love and support, but not all children are gifted. It's a neurological, biological state of being. It's a way of feeling and acting in this world that is neurologically diverse, which we'll get into a little bit later. In the spring of 1999, I had the chance to take a gifted program at Manitou Springs Elementary. I was 12 years into my career. I'd been a high school English teacher. I'd been an athletic director. I was missing a lot of time with a very young family being an athletic director. And the job opened up at the elementary school. And I thought, you know what? I think I can relate to those kids. And somewhere in my mind, I thought, I'm a gifted kid. I can relate to them. I don't know that I thought that specifically, but I just felt like this was something that I could do and I could do well. And then I wouldn't be getting home at midnight on school nights from athletic events, even though I love sports, still do. And I had a classroom in the 1923 wing of Manitou Elementary with these beautiful wood floors with dots all over on the floors where the desks had been once upon a time bolted down. And I looked out on the parking lot at these huge 8 feet tall windows. But if you could look beyond the houses, you could see Pikes Peak. And the previous gifted teacher who ran a pull-out program, which I would do as well, had the kids trained well. Above was the 3rd grade classroom, and the 5th grade classroom were straight above me in this old building. And if I had forgotten what time kids were going to come down, I would be reminded, because I would hear these noises from above, this big thumping noise, and this kind of sound like this ticketa, like mice running through the ceiling in your attic, and slapping noises. And I think I would imagine kids were slamming shut those old desktops. That's what we had. Putting a book inside and slamming shut. Time to go to GT. And they were taken off toward the door because they knew the time. And then all these footsteps, I'd hear all these footsteps coming down the concrete steps toward my classroom. And somebody would always be yelling, "Stop running." And someone would always be replying, "I'm not running, you're running." And then whoosh, this sound as they arrived, a flourish. So I remember being at the University of Colorado as a freshman and reading Shakespeare, and there was a stage direction was always in there, flourish, enter the king. And I kind of knew what flourish meant, right? By context, I could kind of figure it out, but I didn't know exactly what it meant. I remember looking it up, and it's fanfare and bugles and drums. And then the king would actually come in and just like, doo, 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 drum, drum, drum. Here comes the king. And at that moment, when they appeared in the doorway, it was flourish, enter gifted kid. And there they were. They were so full of energy, and I was so full of energy, and they were so excited about the projects, and I was so excited about the projects, and we were all about the projects. We had trash bag parachutes, we had hot glue and dowel sticks and craft saws and all kinds of, I have so many tools that the custodian would sometimes borrow a tool out of my closet. We even had a leaf blower. Now, you might need a leaf blower, right? Because you might need it for sale cars, or you might need to blow up a big trash bag full of air and let it go flying throughout the classroom. And that's a fun way to engage first graders. You might need it to test out your flying machines. We had all of these things, and we were all about those products and projects. And I remember I had heard of supporting emotional needs of gifted, SANG. Well, I'm on that board now. I'd heard about it then, and I thought, well, yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, give me some more sandpaper. And I had read the effective standards from the National Association of Gifted Children. I thought, great idea. Someday we should focus on those after we cut some more dowel sticks, right? That's where I was. But it didn't take that long until I came to understand that gifted and talented was so much more than the projects, that these kids, they led from their heart. And this ability to see from another's perspective at such a young age, like others could not, this strong sense of justice, this understanding a point of view that may be far different from your own, this ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and to make connections and leaps and metaphors and their emotional intensities. They had this vast capacity for empathy. And that's more about who they were. It was so much more than the projects. Stephanie Tolan has written an essay, my favorite thing, this metaphor about gifted kids and cheetahs, and you can find it online. It's called, Is it a cheetah? It's still my favorite thing. That other cats retract their claws to keep them sharp, like carving knives kept in a sheath. The cheetah's claws are designed not for cutting, but for traction. This is an animal biologically designed to run. They have to be who they are, these gifted kids. And who they are partly is this cheetah. And they're so often claws out because they can be no other way. And is that ever you? And sometimes I realize that, hey, that's me. Not every moment of every day, but so often, hey, that's me. I think of gifted kids like coming along in a bassinet and the bassinet tipping forward and the gifted kid falling out and just hitting the ground running. That's how I think of giftedness in our youngest kids. And you are asking yourself all the time as a parent, did you teach her that? Here's this full of physical intensities. Can't touch the lava, the molten magna. She's jumping from cushion to cushion. You hear this cracking noise from the arm of that expensive chair. Did that really have to be your cliff? I crossed the chasm. Chasm? Like, where did she get that? Yesterday, she said the scrape on her knee was insignificant, but she was willing to endure it like a true warrior. Where did that come from? She's only 5 years old. I may have to undergo rehabilitation, she says, as she peels a Band-Aid back from her knee, from her skinned knee. Where did this kid get this? She hit the ground running. And I think of giftedness as those ping pong balls in the lottery air machines and the ricochets happening so fast where one idea is spawning another and connections are made so fast. And it's hard to follow these balls. They're bouncing all over the place. And that's that spaciness, getting lost in the connections, getting lost in the rebounds, and making inferential leaps, being a good guesser. When I first saw that list of the gifted learner versus the advanced learner, check that one out online too. Good guesser is a trait of giftedness. And for a long time, I didn't really like, where does that come from? And where it comes from is this ability to use your intuition to make connections from pieces stored somewhere way back in your brain that you saw on the History Channel when you were 7, to put these pieces together and to become not a good guesser, but a really master interpreter, a master of inferences. And those balls are going so fast, right? Do you know that a child, where Dr. Webb says in one of his books, Dr. James Webb says that a gifted child will come to school in elementary school already knowing 1/2 to 3/4 of the curriculum, already knows it. And new learning will happen in 1 to 2 repetitions, only once or twice, and it becomes a part of what they already know. And if all those balls start bouncing in the same direction at the same time, like you're waiting for the screensaver to come right into the corner, to me, that's that laser focus and brilliance that you see in gifted individuals. So I think in this field, perhaps like no other, that we should always be asking ourselves how this data and how these experiences might be different for gifted kids. Because if they're not different, then everybody is gifted or nobody's gifted. Then we don't have a field. So here is an expert rendering of a typical person. And you can see from my outstanding drawing that there are some lines above that person's head. And those lines above the head are an indication of how the typical person experiences the world. And here's a gifted individual. And for sake of argument, we'll just say in the 95th percentile. That's a common part of any definition all across the states. We're identified gifted children. And we won't argue about those definitions today. Just look, I put it down 95. And these lines represent the way a gifted individual experiences the world. And it's not more deeply, but it's an intensity of interacting in the world through a rich and textured and nuanced lens. It's emotionally and physically and sensually and intellectually and spiritually and existentially experiencing this world in layers. It equals processing, holding memories vividly. It equals making connections at a rapid fire pace. It equals internalizing the strong sense of justice. It equals making creative and intellectual leaps and abstractions and metaphors like others cannot and do not. And it equals a vast potential for compassion. And it equals living a poetry of the world that's beautiful and abundant and can be both wonderful and devastating. And sometimes, if you have a gifted kid, within the same half hour. This is a profoundly gifted individual and my representation of the way they experience the world. Sometimes this neurodiversity, it feels a little bit like having the shoes on your wrong feet. And I'm not talking about twice exceptionality. And I'm not talking about, being on the autism spectrum and gifted or ADHD and gifted. All of those things aside, which may be like constantly wearing your shoes on the wrong feet, metaphorically, that giftedness, neurodiversity often feels like the shoes on the wrong feet. And so let me tell you a little story about like one time I learned about giftedness as a teacher and how this intensity in living may play out. Because we should always ask ourselves how these experiences might be different for gifted kids, all right? So here's a moment. It's the day before either Thanksgiving or Christmas break. A teacher in my building, a fourth grade teacher, is going to do a simulation, a surprise to the students. It's a simulation about equity. She's an outstanding teacher. She's one of the best teachers I've ever worked with. She's sensitive. She knows what she's doing. She's not doing anything wrong. I'll put that up. But what she's doing is when all the students come back from specials that morning, she demands that they all change the shoes to the wrong feet. And she's got just a small area of her classroom marked off with desks. And so they're all jammed into this really small space. And all of these fourth graders are scrambling quickly to put their shoes on the wrong feet. Again, wonderful teacher. Because everybody in her class, except one, is smiling. It's like, what's happening? This is going to be so cool. What's going on? What are we going to be doing? Except Annie. Annie is a gifted kid and she is sobbing. It's too much. She already lives an intense world inside of her head. It has messed with her expectations for this day. The shoes on the wrong feet, physically too much. The intensity of the moment, too much. And she's sobbing. And I don't know if this will be an experience that she'll always remember, but it's an experience that I'll always remember as a time when I learned about giftedness. And I was there to help out. And so Annie and I went to my classroom and 5 minutes, she's still kind of crying. It's like, I came to school and I was just expecting just a normal day. And then this happened. And it was real. It was real and it was disturbing. And it was an uncommon experience compared to the other kids, her intensities. When I was a kid, I had full-size GI Joes. They were 12 inches tall, same size as Barbie back in those days. Mine had a fuzzy beard. This is the early 1970s. I had the coolest ones. I also had a raft, an inflatable raft for a GI Joe. And being a kid, one day I was just messing around and I realized that my foot fit exactly, talking about shoes on feet, fit exactly perfectly inside of a raft. And it just so happened that I had two rafts. And it just so happened that I have 2 feet. And so I started to get this idea. See, that's me. I was younger then. My hair was more blonde and I wasn't wearing glasses. You can tell that's me, right? I had this idea and I thought about it and thought about it and thought about it. And the next day, I took the rafts to the swimming pool and I put them down on that first step and I stepped into them. And I thought, okay, now everybody will know that I have dogs here. I have 3 dogs and 2 cats, and they just wanted to say hello. And they just wanted to say what a wonderful idea it was that I had as a 3rd grader that I could walk on water. I very quickly, however, learned about buoyancy. For me, I was just going to be strolling across the water. How did anyone never think of this? How did they not know that we could use the GI Joe rafts to walk on water? I'd just be strolling across the water, waving. They'd be like, "Hey, that kid's amazing." When we get older, we stop dreaming about walking on water. We've learned all about buoyancy. We start to insulate ourselves against our dreams. We start to insulate ourselves against who we are. And I was so fortunate where I grew up. I grew up in a small town. My dad was a teacher. My teachers knew me as soon as I was born, the ones I would have later on. My classmates I knew from before kindergarten, most of them, and they remained my classmates. And so I never felt like my shoes were on the wrong feet. I was just who I was in this small town. It's just like, that's Mark. That's who he is. He might be walking on water in rafts or it might not work. I didn't care. I remember just taking them off. It didn't matter to me at all. I remember just taking them off and tossing them to the side and going about my life and just swimming. And I compare that with another moment that I had with another 4th grader, kid about the same age. He was new to the school and he had come down in October with his parents to his advanced learning plan conference during parent teacher conferences. And I was asking him how it was going. And he said, I guess it's going okay, except for, I guess I have this brain thing. Like I've got a problem with my brain. And another boy has said this to him in an unkind way. You got a problem with your brain, dude. And this gifted kid being a gifted kid, and it's this sort of insults that 4th graders hurl about, but he's not throwing them back, right? He's not throwing the rocks back. He's taken it to heart. And I mean, his head is in his hands. His eyes are downcast. He's like smoldering. He thinks he's got a problem with his brain. He's convinced he's got a problem with his brain. And this may have been a moment for him, as his mom and I tried to explain, that's what other kids say, those things to try to make themselves feel better. But in this moment, he knows he's different. And I don't know if that will be a moment that will stick with him, but it certainly was a moment for me. And after that happened, I wrote the article, I Used to Be Gifted, and it's on the NAGC website, on their blog. If you go into their blog, you can find I Used to Be Gifted, and you can learn about this episode that happened. But that's when I really started thinking about this I used to be gifted that I got from parents. And this world that we live inside of our heads that we don't necessarily know anything about somebody else because we've lived inside of our own heads. Like it's just who we are, that we've been making these connections, that we've been feeling this world more intensely. But to us, maybe it just seemed normal. And for all this time, even teaching gifted kids, until I read the book Living with Intensity about 5 years ago, I never really thought about it. I was just me. And I was just so lucky that I didn't have those moments like the 4th grade boy had in my school, where he was convinced they had a problem with his brain. And this is not Stephanie Tolan about cheetahs, but this is me. What if we tell cheetahs it's not okay to be cheetahs, or that everybody's a cheetah? What if we tell cheetahs that being a cheetah doesn't make you special and doesn't make you unique, that all animals are cheetahs, at least a little bit? What if we tell them to wear other fur besides cheetah fur so they don't look so fast, so that we can't recognize them by their spots and so they blend in a little better? What if we tell them to slow down so the other animals won't feel bad? Are they still a cheetah? Will they say, I used to be gifted? As Stephanie Tolan asked, despite design and need, however, certain conditions are necessary if it's to attain its famous 70-mile-an-hour top speed, the cheetah. It must be fully grown, it must be healthy, fit, and rested. It must have plenty of room to run. Besides that, it's best motivated to run all out when it's hungry and there are antelope to chase. And if you put a cheetah in a 12-by-foot cage, it may pace or fling itself against the bars in restless frustration. It won't run 70 miles an hour. Is it still a cheetah? That it used to be gifted? And I know I've already gone a half hour, and maybe let me just go another 10 minutes or so, and then we'll do some Q&A. I do have about a year ago, my conversations with CAGT presentation was, what does it mean to thrive? Is your gifted child thriving? It's in our archive, and you can learn more about it then. But let me just go through this thriving very, very quickly and some other things that I want to share. What does it mean to thrive? It's when your virtuosities and your vulnerabilities, this exchange of your virtuosities and your vulnerabilities that allow you to do your best work. A virtuosity is your true and transparent talents, so true about yourself that the best way to know your own virtuosity is to ask someone who loves you, what's my virtuosity? What's my true and transparent talent? And then see if you deny it when it's answered. See if you say, oh, not always, because you may also be a perfectionist. Pretty possible, if you're a gifted individual, that you have a big dose of perfectionism. And vulnerability is being susceptible and assailable, and that does not play well with a perfectionist. A perfectionist rarely strives if it rarely thrives, if this is the definition of thriving, if this is what it means to be perfectionist and gifted, it's like this old circus poster, like you're a virtuoso. Look at him standing on that ball and just balancing and trying to hold it all together, trying not to fall off, trying to make sure that no one thinks they're a fraud, that you're this virtuoso, maybe to everyone except inside your own heart. A parent at a Sing Model Parent group had told us about her daughter one time, who was a fantastic student, who was extremely responsible, who was also one of the best cross-country runners in the city in 7th grade. She had never lost a race. But when she would come home after school, she would often melt down, especially over projects. She would show a side of her that her teachers never saw, that her mom understood very, very well. Beating herself up all the time. In the last race of the year during the city championship, she was in 2nd place. It was clear she would not win. She stopped and she just laid down on the grass and quit. She had never lost before, and she wasn't prepared to lose. And on that day, she wasn't thriving. A 5th grader drew this picture. We were talking about perfectionism, and she drew this shadow of what insight in 5th grade, the shadow of failure, always looking at her, tapping on their shoulder. Are you trying as hard as you can? Maybe you could have done better. Don't disappoint me. Got to enjoy it while it lasts, because you just got lucky. This is all in that other presentation in a much more extensive way. And the student that I had, who would eventually be named one of Colorado Springs' best and brightest 100 teens, did not hand in assignments to me. She always handed in an apology. I'm sorry, this probably isn't very good. And I bet you can guess whether or not that would be very good. This is a first grader, a primary aged girl, who's responding to what would it feel like to fly. And there is a description. She's a gifted learner. I knew it in first grade. As soon as we did identifications, a year and a half later, yeah, she was. It's like, I knew this. I already knew it. I knew her parents. And her dad's a helicopter pilot in the Air Force and an officer. It's like, yeah, nah, she's already. And she was. But here she is describing what would it feel like to fly. What do you expect a first grader to describe the joy of it? But here's this first grade girl. Already society is stepping into the life of a female and saying, really, you need to take care of other people and stop thinking about your own giftedness. She was worried about her sister at home in a wheelchair who was not able to fly. And she wanted to be home where she could play, subjugating her needs to the needs of others. One of the traits of primary giftedness, especially in girls. Talk very, very quickly. This is a whole presentation, a whole nother thing. The trajectory of a gifted girl. A gifted girl will reach her strongest self-esteem at age 10. And then that self-esteem will begin to fall and fall and fall. And it will not start to recover until the college years. And she will not return to age 10 confidence levels until she is 50 years old. One time, a gifted fourth grader said to me during her advanced learning plan interview for her social emotional goal, she wants to get to sixth grade, so she won't be gifted anymore. She'll just be normal. And gifted girls, and in particular, try really, really hard to make you proud. They want to make you proud. And I like how this quote says, most of you, because there's that part of it too. We should be careful about how we talk to our cheetahs. The cheetahs in our own house, the cheetahs in our classroom. We should be careful about how we talk to ourselves. Do you ever slow down? You're worrying about everything. Can't you just stick with one thing? You're so sensitive and dramatic, and you're so demanding. You're so driven. Can't you ever be satisfied? Can we rephrase those? I love your passion and energy. You have such a big heart. I wish everybody had a heart like you. You have so many interests. There's always something exciting around the corner with you. Someday, there's going to be this world of opportunities that'll be at your fingertips. You always want to do well, and you never want to disappoint anyone. You know what? That's a beautiful way to live. I hope you always remember, though, to be kind to yourself along the way. That's a gifted intensity that just came into my throat. See, I was getting choked up, and just like this physiological thing came over me, and it clogged up my throat. I admit it, I'm a gifted kid. We understand when we get older that all these traumas, both great and small, and what about the traumas of the last couple of years, that we have to insulate ourselves somehow. It's a part of survival. You can't run the risk of feeling it all like Annie did, or like our boy from fourth grade who's had a problem with his brain, our shoes on the wrong feet. But cheetahs have to run. Gifted kids have to run. They are who they are, even with the shoes on the wrong feet. And gifted kids have this wide open receptivity, and you did too. These bared sensitivities and enhanced emotional depth. As kids, you don't learn, you don't know to wrap yourself up in these layers. And sometimes teens and adults become really expert at layering these things. Gifted kids live the poetry of a world. It's beautiful and it's abundant. And I think that's my own definition of giftedness. You're telling a poetry of the world. You're writing a poetry of the world. And it might be a poetry of math. It might be a poetry of music or performance. It might be a poetry of art or empathy or connections or leadership, or it might actually be writing poetry itself. And it's important to remember that that process of becoming one's wonderful self, though it's messy, it's not perfect, it's not even close. And that the key in the end is just to simply keep writing that poetry, to be yourself, to find people who understand who you are, to be with them, to have a home, to find those people who can make it a home, to understand there are people who support you and they love you, and a place to call it, and a place where you can run, but you can fly. I should be getting down to the end of this. And what I had next was some examples of gifted kids who remembered how to fly. So I'll go through these much faster than I would normally. But the kindergartner who can already put personality into his cartooning, to him flying tickles. The fourth grader who has written a 237-page book and published it on Amazon, and her classmates have autographed copies. We've all bought them. Our third and fourth graders obsessed with projects and quirky, adventuresome ideas, and who've gone through the whole Warrior series of books, just like 40 or 50 books in less than a quarter of school. And those stuffed cats they're not stuffed cats. Those are warriors. They have personalities, they have clans, and you can take the quiz and find out which warrior clan you're in. She designed it, and I'm proud to say I'm in the water clan. The boy who explained every answer on the cognitive abilities test nonverbal section, explained every answer, not got them right, explained why they were right, all the way through to the very last one, scored in the 99.9th percentile, got to the last one, just said, nope, don't know. You know this kid, this really creative kid, it might be you. Open the desktop, and there's so many ideas just bursting to come out. The girls I had in my STEM groups, they knew how to fly. The very best Teacher Appreciation Week compliment I ever got. We know these kids. At age 10, Gracie is at the top of her confidence. You cut the lines between weird and unique. Unique wins. If you've ever been on a playground, you know that all kids can fly. All you have to do is watch when the doors open. They start running, and then their arms come up, and they're not just running, they're flying. They're looking down at their feet. Why are they looking down at their feet? Because they're watching for the moment when their feet are actually going to lift off of the ground. All kids know how to fly. Don't forget to remember that they know how to fly. They knew how to fly even during a pandemic. They knew how to fly during the Great Depression. All kids of all colors, all ethnic groups, all socioeconomic backgrounds know how to fly. Don't forget to remember that. If only for a moment, kids know how to move without their feet touching the ground. They don't need rubber rafts to walk across a swimming pool. You can throw them to the side and just go on living. Gifted kids not only run like cheetahs, but sometimes they fly. Did you used to be gifted? There's my contact information. I'm excited that this book is going to come out sometime during the fall. And now what's going to happen is I have to poke around a little bit on here because I'm also the host, and I have to get back to my host screen. So let's see if that can happen. And I have to see if can I find unshare some of these things, get some things closed. And I have to see, can I find the Facebook with the chat in it? And I might have to poke around to do that a little bit. So please bear with me for a minute. We are still live on Facebook. That's going good. Okay. I can't find the chat. We'll see if, oh, Nanette has asked some questions. So she's texting them to me. So I'm going to look on my text because I can't find the chat. I'm sorry. I wish I could, but for some reason, I don't see it. I don't see it on my live feed. Is messed up. One more try. Yeah, no, I don't see it. Okay, so possible question. Said the giftedness is not a pat on the back, but many adults and children don't like to say they're gifted. What do you think that is, and why do others perceive that statement as you're patting yourself on the back? And I think it has a lot to do with who we are in America, that there's a large part of society that plays to that you're supposed to play to the middle, that you're not supposed to think you're anything special or anything better than anybody else. I think it's related to anti-intellectualism. But I think it also comes from our own hearts, where we want to be humble. We don't want to be that guy, or we don't want to be that gal who goes around tooting their own horn. And it's just that word giftedness seems to imply a lot of those things. And so I hope, through the whole presentation, some of that came around and came more clear. I don't have a pat, easy answer for that. And I don't think that the many attempts over the years to rebrand giftedness with some other word always failed. And I just don't think it works. It's just, that's the word. It's the word. And you can call it what you want to call it, but everybody knows it's the gifted program. I've been involved in Go. I've been involved in advanced proficiency by design, but everybody knows it's the gifted program. Another question I'm seeing here, that many teachers and parents aren't comfortable nor embrace students' wild and crazy ideas. True. How would you help them understand how important it is to not only provide opportunities for students to explore those ideas, but also to nurture them? And I have had a lot of colleagues in 34 years, and almost every single one has their heart in the right place, truly loves kids, truly wants to do the best for kids. I think that being a teacher is very, very difficult, and it's overwhelming. And in the past 2 years, it has been incredibly difficult and incredibly overwhelming. And doing what you have to do to keep up with the requirements and the curriculum and show up well in the state testing, because you better show up well in the state testing, that consumes a lot of your life. And it doesn't mean that you don't want to expand, you don't want to do best for what you can for all kids. All of that being said, I think the best way for people who've done what I've done for decades, which is a gifted resource teacher. I didn't have my own students. I was a support person, like a reading specialist might be, like a special education specialist might be, is to build relationships, to offer to be in the classroom, to support what the teachers are doing, and to build those relationships. And when the relationships are built, oftentimes we have time to listen. We have time to try things in the safety of trust that has been built. And for parents as well, and I do presentations sometimes about advocacy, and my number one suggestion is to start building the relationship, and don't even say a thing about giftedness. Be that parent who's willing to build a relationship with a teacher, who's willing to volunteer, and who's willing to support. Build the relationship, everything else will follow. The advocacy then, if it needs to be done, and it may not need to be, if it needs to be done, then you've already built that relationship and you've built that trust. I'll see if I got any other questions here on my texts. I don't see any. I imagine that there probably are some. We are running short on time here, and you have my email address, portable gifted and talented at gmail.com. You can also contact me through my website, which is giftedlearners.org. Really excited for the school year. I'm really excited for our conference coming up, for the CAGT conference. It's coming up in October. We do have a family night on that Tuesday. I believe it's on that Monday, sorry. I believe it's October 17th. I'm just doing that off the top of my head. I might be wrong. After all, I'm the kid who sunk to the bottom of the pool wearing G.I. Joe rafts on my feet. But hey, I am who I am. I used to be gifted. I still am. Thank you so much for joining me for tonight for this first session to kick off the new school year. And